In the World of Warcraft, zones are the building blocks that create the world that your character lives in. From the easygoing starter zones when you're first just getting a look into this world, or notorious zones like Stranglethorn Vale on PvP servers, where questing naturally brings together so many players of the opposite faction and there are many battles, all the way to endgame zones like the Eastern Plaguelands that are dark, gloomy, and threatening. These are the places that the game happens. Stories are told and memories are made, and each and every expansion has brought on a unique set of zones for players, from the mountains of Kunlai to open world cities such as Soromar and beyond. The zones of World of Warcraft have always been a huge part of it, and definitely always will be. So today I wanted to cover what for me has been the best overall zone of each of World of Warcraft's expansions so far. We'll also be going in order of how good the zones are instead of by expansions. So the zones towards the start of the video are great for their expansion but not the best overall, and the ones towards the end are the best of the best. So with that said, let's make a start. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Coopert. Coopert is a free browser extension that lets you save money on your online shopping with no extra effort on your part, and is supported by over 3 million retailers worldwide. Getting started is simple. You install the extension on your browser, make an account, and then there'll be a few different ways to save money. First is the automatic coupon testing, where Coopert will start up at the checkout and test the available coupons out there. It then applies the best one to your cart so you can save the most on your purchase. Secondly are cashback rewards. On your homepage or shopping cart page you can see your cashback offers. Activate this while you shop and Coopert will return a portion of the commission back to your account, which is withdrawable via PayPal, gift cards or bank card. Third is price comparison, where Coopert will show you if an item's cheaper elsewhere so you can get the best deal. Coopert is free and it works with Chrome, Edge, Opera, Firefox and Safari, and is trusted by 9 million shoppers weekly across both desktop and mobile combined, and it also works alongside over 200,000 stores worldwide to get you the best deals. It's a free extension after all, so if you're somebody who's online shopping quite often and want to get the best deals, download Coopert today and start saving. Many thanks to Coopert for the sponsor today. Let's get back to WoW. And we'll be starting off in the Cataclysm for our first pick here, the expansion which totally changed the whole world of vanilla forevermore. I'll also be focusing on the leveling zones from 80 to 85 here, as despite every zone undergoing changes, these were the truly new additions to the game. And you know, one of the criticisms Cataclysm gets is that it goes a bit too far with pop culture references. I mean, sure, World of Warcraft has always done this, but in Cataclysm they forgot to do it in moderation. There was just too many of them. And if I hadn't played through Cataclysm fairly recently, I would have picked Uldum here, because I wanted this zone to be cool so badly. This had been a zone which was rumoured to exist all the way back since vanilla, and it was even tied into a quest that you complete after having done a full run of Uldaman. And to be honest, even though the first half of Uldum's questing is basically an Indiana Jones reference, I still enjoyed it a lot. It did feel as though you were uncovering ancient tombs and exploring this vast desert that had been lost to time. But then eventually you reach what is roughly the second half of the Uldum questing, and you come across a character called Commander Schnotz. And at this point, as much as I hate using the word, the zone just becomes cringe. He's supposed to be the stereotypical bad guy from Indiana Jones, but it just gets way too much with how involved he is. All in all, the joke just goes too far. So unfortunately, as much as I'd like to, I can't really pick Uldum. And the rest of the zones in Cataclysm are okay to good though, I think. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to pick Mount Hyjal. Hyjal was a zone that was briefly visited as a raid during the Burning Crusade, and it was even a place you could access in vanilla, but this was the first time that it was brought to life as a full-on zone. It was also one of the 2 starting zones in Cataclysm as well, featuring a story that led all the way up to the opening of the Firelands raid in a later patch. Overall, Cataclysm did introduce some good zones, and Hyjal gets the pick here. Next up is the Shadowlands, an expansion which absolutely had some impressive visuals, such as when you are flying from one zone to the next from Oribos. And it's the visuals which I think are the main thing that draws me towards picking my favourite zone here, which is going to be Ardenweald. Ardenweald must have one of the most vibrant colour palettes of any WoW zone that we've seen, with more or less something standing out at every single corner you turn. The reason Shadowlands is at this point on the list though is that every zone, at least early on into the expansion, felt as though they had a common problem. They just weren't much fun to navigate without flying. Now you did end up getting flying in Shadowlands in patch 9.1, but they made you grind for it. And if you were coming back to the game, you probably had a fair bit of work ahead of you before you could access it, including including a large quest chain, your Covenant story, and reaching a certain renown level. But without flying, there were just so many vertically placed areas or pathways where you had to go miles around something, and eventually it just got kind of annoying to get around the Shadowlands. Despite that, from the zones that existed and from my experience playing the expansion, I still think I'm picking Ardenweald here. Following that is the Warlords of Draenor, and here we're going to be going with Shadowmoon Valley. So Warlords of Draenor infamously had an absolute disaster of a launch, but after you got out of your garrison and into the open world, things started to improve. Shadowmoon Valley was the opening zone that Alliance players had to experience, which was a stark contrast from Shadowmoon Valley during the Burning Crusade, where it was just a total wasteland. Here in Warlords of Draenor, it's much more of a somber experience that feels as though a shadow truly has been cast over the entire zone. I think it's also one of the better attempts Warlords of Draenor had at creating a zone that showed us how Draenor would look before it became Outland. I guess the biggest disappointment with the zone is that Karabor, which you'll know as the Black Temple from TBC, was absent as it was intended to be used originally within the zone. In fact, Blizzard planned at one point for Karabor to be the Alliance capital during WoD, instead of some small forgettable camp next to Ashran. A big shame, but missing content was unfortunately a big part of what made Warlords of Draenor such a letdown for many players. Despite all that, I think Shadowmoon Valley has to be the pick here as a solid opening zone to Warlords of Draenor and a good representation of Draenor pre-TBC. After that I have Dragonflight, which, thinking about it, I'm kinda surprised which I'm putting it at this point on the list, because I think back to this expansion and the first thing that comes up is swooping around, dragon riding and taking in all of the sights. Dragonflight had to have been the most cinematic world WoW had ever seen up to this point in time, and that was definitely one of its strong points for me. But ideally the zone needs to do a bit more than just looking nice, and when I think about the moments when I'm not flying around at max speed on my dragon, the zones don't seem quite as impressive. All the same though, if I'm picking a zone from Dragonflight, I'm going for the Azure Span. I definitely got some kind of Grizzly Hills type vibes from this zone, and given the music that plays there, I don't think this was a mistake from Blizzard either. It almost feels as though it's a bit of a mashup of different Wrath of the Lich King zones such as Grizzly Hills or Borean Tundra in appearance, and I am completely okay with that. There's even a Tuskar village on the edge of the waters too. You can't get more Wrath of the Lich King than having a random Tuskar village, can you? Overall, the Azure Span is a great looking zone, enjoyed the music, and I think it was the best addition from Dragonflight. Next is World of Warcraft's current expansion, The War Within, and honestly the pick here is very close to the Azure Span. In fact, I think these two are kind of interchangeable for me. Anyways, I think there's been one standout zone from The War Within so far, and that has to be Hallowfall. One of the best moments about Hallowfall is when you first ascend up that massive cave from Azj-Kahet and get the first sight of the Beledar illuminating the entire zone. Hallowfall is an underground zone too, which I've historically been critical of in other videos, but because of the size of the zone and the amount of light in it, it doesn't actually feel as though you are underground. I think this was a great decision for The War Within, as there are already plenty of underground zones to go and see, so Hallowfall provided some much needed variety other than seeing another zone predominantly themed around grey rocks and obstacles. There's also a throwback to Arathi forces, which is an interesting tie-in to a very old faction in the WoW universe, and rediscovering them and why they've been here and what they've been doing was interesting to take part in. Hallowfall feels like one of the more standout zones we've seen in WoW for a while, so based on that, so far in The War Within it gets the pick from me. Following that, we're heading back a few expansions to Battle for Azeroth. For all the problems that BFA brought on with all of its tasks that needed to be done weekly, temporary power gains and more, it definitely had a bunch of good zones in it as a whole, and I think the one that was especially good was Kul Tiras. Kul Tiras is of course another throwback to a place which has existed in the WoW universe as far back as the RTS games, and in WoW during vanilla you can find Kul Tiras units in Joritar occupying a fortress that low-level Horde players have to deal with. So finally getting a chance to visit this place for real was something that I think a lot of people would have been looking forwards to when it was announced to be a zone for the expansion, and I think Blizzard did a good job in delivering a port city in Kul Tiras. Highlights of the zone include Borealis as the Alliance capital, where they really got the feeling of the city right, and it was also just super convenient to navigate without being overwhelmingly large or confusing. The soundtrack was great and memorable, and definitely added to the whole maritime themes that they had going on throughout the zone. Outside of Borealis was a snowy mountainous zone which was easy enough to navigate, had a lot of quests going on, and it was just a good time to play through for me. Kul Tiras was definitely a high point of the battle Battle for Azeroth expansion, and despite there being many other good zones that will be worth a mention, I think this is the best one overall for me. Next up we have the entry from Mists of Pandaria, and for this expansion the choice for me is going to be Kunlai Summit. This is a zone you'll encounter about halfway through your questing journey. This area features Pandara monasteries, huge mountain ranges to cover, and of course the Grummels. And with some not so subtle hints to the Himalayas and Sherpas and so on, this zone has always had quite a majestic feeling to it. It also stands along the wall to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, which you still won't be entering for some time whilst you're leveling, as well as moving on to more dangerous territory further west in the Townlong Steppes. Kunlai Summit really captures that zen feeling that Mists of Pandaria tries to accomplish through its landscape, the Pandaran race, the music, and the quests that take place within it. It's interesting to see the monasteries from the outside to search for treasure in hidden places, and there's a lot of hidden treasure in MoP, and of course there's that one quest where you have to scale the tallest mountain. Overall a very strong zone, good soundtrack, and it just fits the theme that Pandaria is going for so well, so that's why it gets my pick for Mists of Pandaria. After that we're venturing back all the way again to the Burning Crusade and Outland. For me in TBC there are really two standout zones which I think are above the rest. Those are Zangarmarsh as well as Nagrand. Zangarmarsh just feels good to step into after finally being done with Hellfire Peninsula, offering you a much different perspective on this alien world. It has a good music score to it, and I've always found questing there to be pretty enjoyable, bar the one or two quests where they want you to go swimming around for 20 minutes or so. The highlight of the zone though has to be the Coilfang Reservoir, which contains 3 dungeons and a raid. What sets this apart from other raid entrances or dungeons is that you need to actually swim down through a pipe to gain access to it, which is just to this day such a cool way to enter the instances. But despite me definitely being a Zangarmarsh enjoyer for the Burning Crusade, it just has to go to Nagrand as the top zone. As an equally tranquil and massive zone, Nagrand will be one of the places that you reach a bit later during your TBC questing. Straight away the floating islands throughout the zone make it instantly distinguishable to any WoW player. In fact, these floating islands, or some variation of them at least, were found by players in a hidden section of a map in vanilla, showing that this set of scenery had been a long time in the making. Nagrand features a return from the infamous Hemet Nessingwary, who had finally escaped the jungles of Stranglethorn Vale to make his way here, and he and his merry band of hunters have a whole lot of killing for you to be doing this time around. Nagrand also features the Ring of Blood. This was the first instance of this group-based PvE combat arena, which would go on to see reappearances in many expansions to come, such as the Amphitheatre of Anguish in Wrath or the Crucible of Carnage in Kata. There's also the Ring of Trials PvP arena as well, which you can venture into. And far to the west are high-level demons and even some level 70 content. In fact, the only part of Nagrand that feels a bit underused is Oshugun to the southwest. Perhaps the best feature of Nagrand is being able to stack up your quest log and return with the whole screen showing as complete, and in WoW there are few better feelings than that. Nagrand has always been a good zone to revisit, and I definitely rate it highly, which brings us on to our top 3 picks with 3 versions of WoW left to go over. At the third spot is Wrath of the Lich King, and you probably already know which zone I'm going for here. It's practically the most basic, best zone you can pick, but it's got that reputation for a reason, and I'm of course talking about Grizzly Hills. You know, when I'm thinking back to Wrath of the Lich King, honestly Howling Fjord isn't that far behind Grizzly Hills in terms of how much I enjoyed the zone. The first boat ride into the Howling Fjord from Stormwind is just amazing, the soundtrack is great, and the progression through the zone is strong too. Blizzard even tried to put some kind of Fel Reaver type roaming mob in the Howling Fjord too in the Storm Giant, but I can't ever remember getting caught out by him. In fact, the only real letdown with the Howling Fjord for me was some of the quests towards the start of the zone, where you have to use so many items that just have an obnoxiously long cooldown for no reason. The Grizzly Hills though is a banger zone throughout. Perhaps the most iconic part of it is simply the soundtrack, which was unlike anything we had heard up to that point in time. Across the land of Northrend too, Grizzly Hills is a break from all the death and/or snow that you can find in any other zone. It even has a throwback to Archmage Aragorn, who has risen from the dead to control a new pack of Worgen, before you track him down and put a stop to that once again. Grizzly Hills also has a bunch of quest hubs that all feel pretty different from one another, such as the Dwarves in Dunargol to the southeast, the Troll Ruins just north of that, and even a PvP zone in Venture Bay to the southwest. Overall, the Grizzly Hills combines a great soundtrack, good appearance with varied questing, and I think that's what makes it so memorable. At the second spot is going to be the entry from Legion, and here it's definitely the best endgame zone Blizzard has ever made, and that remains true today, and that would be Suramar. Suramar followed along the story of a hidden group of Nightborn elves and took them from desperation and hiding to over time being able to reclaim their city. There hasn't been a more complete story taking place in a zone than Suramar in my opinion, and a big reason why is that not everything was available from day one. As patches progressed, more of the story was rolled out, new characters were introduced or new parts of the city. Suramar had withered training which allowed you to raise your own army and put them to the test, as well as some voice lines from the guards that anyone who played the expansion will instantly recognize. This zone felt genuinely dangerous at first too because there was no flying and there were so many obstacles between the various objectives, but you really got the feeling as though you were undercover, gradually restoring the Nightborn to their former glory, as well as eliminating the Legion. And of course this all culminated in the Nighthold raid. Overall, Suramar was an amazing zone, visually great, good soundtrack, interesting questline, and a story that really felt impactful. As such, it deserves such a high spot on the list. Which means that the top spot is the entry from Vanilla, or should I say entries. I say this because originally I wanted to just pick Westfall for Vanilla, but I've realised that it's more than that which makes this part of the WoW universe so special. It's how everything is connected together between Elwyn, Westfall, Redridge and Duskwood. In future expansion, zones are more often than not just their own thing and they have their own part of the story to tell. They're designed for certain level brackets and they award loot of a certain item level. This wasn't the case in Vanilla, where you were absolutely expected to go back and forth and to visit different zones time and again. And for me, that opening quest loot for the Alliance from say level 12 all the way to about 28 is one of the best and most replayable sections of any game that I've ever played. Of course there's other zones in the mix too, such as the wetlands to get to this level, but those 4 zones around Stormwind are just what make it such a great experience. You go from a fresh adventurer with nothing in your bag to having some experience and abilities. You might find shoulder items, rings and possibly even a neck if you're lucky, and above all you'll really start to take steps into the mid-game of Vanilla's leveling content, where things only start ramping up more and more. From just getting started out and finding out about the Defias Brotherhood, to taking on the Elite Orcs in Redridge, to all the iconic quests in Duskwood such as unleashing Stitches. Blizzard just did such an incredible job with this set of zones, and really over 20 years later for me, this experience just hasn't been beaten. But that's it, and just my opinion on the best overall zone of each WoW expansion so far. Let me know what you thought and if there's anything that you would have picked different in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you all on the next one very soon.